Now, the Chinese dictatorship's huge push, a threatening push to sign up 10 of our Pacific neighbours to a security deal, today hit a snag. Now, China's aim is to create a line of friendly islands that would absolutely dominate the sea lanes to our east. It'd be like a wall. But when China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi met diplomats from the islands today in Fiji, several balked at the closer security arrangements that the dictatorship wanted. It wanted economic deals, but also security deals. And Wang looked like thunder in announcing a final deal would be postponed.
After the meeting, China will release its own position paper on our own positions and propositions and cooperation proposals with Pacific Island countries. And going forward, we will continue to have ongoing and in-depth discussions and consultations to shape more consensus on cooperation.
Joining me is Alexander Downer, our longest-serving Foreign Minister, and in my opinion, Alexander, our best. Alexander Downer, first though, as a former Liberal leader yourself, what do you make of Peter Dutton now taking that job? Is this the leader the Liberals need for these days?
I think he is. I watched his press conference myself during the course of the morning. I thought it was exceptionally well done, and I think he came out with precisely the messages that he should come out with. This notion of moving to the left or the right, I mean, it's not about that. It's about asserting values, winning the debate on values and winning the debates on policy, and having the guts to take on your opponents. I often think a lot of Liberals, they're fearful of getting engaged in debates and of being abused. There's no point in being in politics if you live in fear of debating people. You have to be gutsy. And Peter Dutton is a very gutsy politician. I've known him very well over many years, and he has the right values for the Liberal Party, and I think he will debate fiercely with the Labor Party. He'll do well.
To be honest, I have to say it does in fact represent a move to the right, simply because a lot of Liberals in the past 7 years didn't have the guts to stand for Liberal values, didn't argue for them, were silent on them, precisely because they didn't have faith in them. So when people say, look, it's going to be the Liberal Party, that already represents a tremendous change. Now,
you lose the values. You lose the values debate and you lose the policy debate if you start conceding points to your opponents and saying, I'm just going to be a variation of what my opponents say. That is fatal in politics. It's fatal.
Correct. Plus, of course, you can never win an argument if you don't dare to put it in the first place. Alexander Downer, China's push in the Pacific. Let's start with the basics. How much of a threat do you think it is?
I think it is a threat. I think that it's perfectly clear they would like to do what they would like to do throughout the Indo-Pacific region, and that is reduce countries to being subjects of China. You know, not to invade them or anything like that, but basically to have them pay tribute, to use the old-fashioned expression, to pay tribute to China. That's what they want, and they want to weaken our control, our influence, our role in the region, and they want to replace it with their own. So I think it is dangerous. And if I were to be critical of the Morrison government, and they weren't perfect, I would say that they didn't get on the plane often enough and go to the Pacific and build particularly the foreign minister, and build the personal relationships with the leaders of the region, which you just have to do if you want to exercise influence there.
I could not believe why the Liberals would appoint a chronically shy person as foreign minister, too shy to talk to our media and too shy to make those sort of personal connections you talked about. It's been a disaster, really. But how's this Chinese push going? Now, from what little we know, China could reach only a limited economic deal with Fiji, not on security. It did sign a deal that's so far been kept secret with Samoa. We don't know what's in it. Kiribati wouldn't sign a security deal, but has agreed to upgrade an airport that China could use. And China's best success seems to be a security deal with the Solomon Islands. But do you think that in time, China is going to get most of what it wants?
No, I think in time it'll depend very much on the Australian and to a lesser extent the New Zealand governments. Both of those governments will have to be, diplomatic, cunning, but robust in dealing with this problem. They need to make it clear to the leaders that it would cause huge concern to Australia if the scenario you describe eventually happened. And they need to sit down with them face to face and do that. So I would say this situation has called for the last 3 or 4 years, but it certainly now calls for the foreign minister to spend a lot of her time in the Pacific. See, I've never been in favour of this idea of having a junior minister responsible for Pacific Island affairs. I think, the foreign minister has to take control of those relationships, has to build those relationships, at least to make them respectful personal relationships. Because in the Pacific, the personal relations are critically important.
And who wants to be visited by the junior minister? You're already feeling like you're getting the bum's rush right there. Now, One last thing, Alexander Downer. East Timor's President Ramos Horta has just been re-elected, of course. He says he's not going to sign a security deal with China. But that said, he's attacked Australia, saying, why would the Solomon Islands seek out China for support in maritime security and for the police? Well, maybe it's because the Solomon Islands' closest neighbour, Australia, has not responded to their need. Maybe their neighbour wasted time lecturing them on human rights instead of trying to help. Now, I wonder, Alexander Downer, if this is fair when we have in fact given the Solomons 2 free patrol boats, a patrol boat sort of harbour-y thing, and 13 more boats to other islands. And when we also sent soldiers last year to save the Solomon Islands government from rioters, and we, of course, sent soldiers to save the East Timorese from Indonesia. Is it fair to accuse us of not being generous enough?
No, we've been very well over the years. We've been incredibly generous to the Solomon Islands, and we've saved the Solomon Islands as a country, frankly, going all the way back to 2003 when we sent the regional assistance mission in there. We put billions into the Solomon Islands over the last few years. No, this is a different issue. This is an issue of how China is using the weaknesses of governance in some of the countries of the Pacific, and not least in the case of Solomon Islands. It's perfectly clear what's going on here. The only thing is the Australian government should be blowing the whistle on all of this stuff, because I tell you who we have on side in the case of the Solomon Islands, and that is the Solomon Islands people. The Solomon Islanders, they love Australia. Correct. And they know what we've done. And Sogabari, he doesn't like Australia. That goes back many years. He hates us. And we don't like him either. He's not a good man. Sogabari is not a good, honest and honourable man. And we can win the Solomon Islanders over to our cause if we engage directly with them at a personal level. It's not about more aid or human rights lectures. That's true. It's not about that. It is about personal relationships.
Nor is it about climate change. Alexander Downer, thank you so much indeed for your time.